Gurmeet Ram Rahim. How many times?
Rajdeep, I need to come in now.
Ma'am, no, each of you will get equal time. Shama Mohammed, Sanju Verma, fade us down. You made your point. No, each of you must have respect for the other person. There are 5 guests. Sushmita Dev, let's look at that. One of the issues that has been raised consistently is that how do you increase women participation in labor force? Even though the figures are up, India is still well below most countries in the world when it comes to women participation in labor force. The problem is political parties are not doing enough to ensure that women get jobs that can shore up their incomes. Many of them are therefore casual labor even today across the country. And therefore, the fact is rather at times than focusing on giving some instant scheme like you even have done some of your schemes in Bengal, where is the effort to ensure encouraging greater women participation in the labor force? That is the critical question.
Absolutely. I think a very interesting point, which I'm sure Tara will agree with me, is that if we put a value to the work a woman does within her household, okay? If you put a value to the amount of work a woman does in her household, that would itself have a huge impact on our GDP. But in our country, we don't do it. So although I use the word dole, sometimes to give a woman some sort of a, if you like, some sort of a financial incentive is indirectly actually recognizing her work as a primary caretaker, as someone who does all the household work. Because ordinarily, if you look at an upper middle class family, you pay someone to do that job. That is one.
No, but which party is enhancing women's employment? According to Sanju Verma, through schemes like Mudra, women are being given a chance of getting loans to at least make them possibly more, to increase women participation in labor force, to actually make them self-employed. You're talking about household work. I'm saying the critical question is which government is coming up with a scheme directed at women to ensure that they actually become far greater participants in the labor force.
You see, there is a scheme called Lakpati. You know, it is also something that Prime Minister Modi apparently launched. For instance, due to a scheme which is facilitated by banks and the government in Bengal, there are more than 38 lakh Lakpati women. That means you're giving them a source of self-employment. You're giving them a source of self-employment, not necessarily working for a company. So there are several instances like that, and especially if you look at the growth of self-help groups. Okay, there are small groups of women. So if for instance in Bengal government, there are huge incentives given to self-help groups so that they're self-employed. So we talk about employment, there is enough for any government to be done. And you know, most of the time we always... Sorry.
You're making that point, but Tara Krishnaswamy, you want to dive in as someone who's not in that sense with a political party. You see, these self-help groups, for example, Seva in Gujarat, what was started by Ela Bhatt, these are models that are being scaled up in different parts of the country. Political support to some of them has been limited. Some governments have gone out of their way to help to provide support to self-help groups, but many have not. Is that what politicians should be doing? Working with civil society, working with these self-help groups to scale them up?
So, Rajdeep, there are 2 or 3 points that were brought up. So, first of all, LPG, just because it is put in the same sentence as women, by the Prime Minister, it doesn't become a women's issue. It's a price rise, inflation issue. Unlike Ujjwala, where you're looking at a transition from unhealthy cooking fuels to healthy cooking fuels, LPG is purely an inflation, price rise, and a family poverty money management issue. And it applies to families, applies to men and women. That's number one. So we should not center the discussion on LPG alone. Second is, as far as labor force and jobs generation is concerned, again, with your mood of the nation, about 60% of the people, which means half of those surveyed are women, said the government is doing nothing to generate, very little to nothing to generate jobs. So you are spot on in saying that, are we doing enough to increase the labor force participation rate in general? and of women in particular. Now, during state elections, various state parties that compete in the state elections have promised loans to women entrepreneurs, micro loans, of course, self-help groups and so forth. But the biggest benefit actually is the direct benefit transfer. All of the direct benefit transfer schemes we talked about do 2 or 3 things. One is dignity. Every time a woman needs, remember that when you have zero earnings, you have zero money at hand, every time you need anything from sanitary napkins to headache medicine, you need to go stand in front of someone and ask. And they're going to question you, how much do you need? Why do you need so much? I just gave it to you yesterday, kind of a thing. That is a very undignified way of going about your life. So number one, it gives them dignity. That is why it's so important and so impactful. Second is, they're able to use the money for absolute essentials, whether it's fruit and vegetables, milk, things that supplement what you and I take for granted as part of a balanced meal for themselves and their children. And finally, of course, they're able to save and use it towards the SHGs. If you look, and that is where your local employment comes in. One last thing I'll say. Kudumbashree in Kerala has grown to be what, 100 crore enterprise, entirely run by SHGs through the direct benefit stream, through the panchayats, pooling the money. So imagine, like in Karnataka, we have the Griha Lakshmi scheme. In Griha Lakshmi, the money that you get every month, if all of the women pooled the money, you're talking about lakhs of money every month in every village and many lakhs of money in every panchayat, which means that you're now able to invest it and do certain businesses on scale, whether it is production of foods, packaging, processing, even for the midday meal schemes, or to sell in, as part of cottage industries, or something much larger like
I take your point. I take your point. Schemes like Kudumbashree, schemes like Griha Lakshmi, schemes like Kanya Shri, Rupashri, all of these in a way are path breakers. They again show that governments are recognizing the power of women. But while they recognize the power of women, Nidhi Sharma, and I come to my next question, do they realize the power of political representation of women? Do we need greater political representation for women across the board? We have already seen the lists that have come out. Most of the party lists are below 20% so far, whether it's the BJP, which has come up with a list of 195 names. Do you believe that men are unwilling to walk the talk, and are women leaders perhaps more willing to do so? Or are women leaders also unwilling to allow more women to come up? What does your research show?
So, Rajdeep, first I'll just give you data very quickly. My problem is across political parties. If you see the first few elections, the state assembly elections right after the women's reservation bill, which showed the intention of all political parties to give a seat on the table, the proverbial seat on the table to women, was the women's reservation bill. Nobody opposed it, and it was passed, right? So if you look at assembly elections and the tickets given by all political parties, none of the political parties in the state assembly elections, Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, Telangana and Madhya Pradesh, none of the parties gave, not even 20% tickets were given to women. What does it show? And imagine fewer would have won in those elections. So that goes to show that nobody is willing to give. I'm going to make it absolutely gender neutral. Because if you do not have seat on the table, you are not a force to reckon with. So are men willing to give this seat on the table? No, not for anyone will they give that seat on the table. Then what about women leaders? You asked me specifically, what about women leaders? My question to all the women, Rajdeep, I'll just finish this. None of the women leaders, when I was researching for my book, when I was going through, personal anecdotes of Indira Gandhi and even Margaret Thatcher, neither of the two super powerful prime ministers, neither of the two actually thought of themselves as women leaders. They thought of themselves as leaders. Thatcher actually thought that, she took pride in the fact that she was called the only man in her cabinet. So the thing is that any of these women, even if you see our cabinet ministers, successive cabinets, not just of Modi government, even before, have you seen anyone championing the cause of women as such, positioning themselves as women leaders? No, you will not find them, because women politics is absolutely different.